2 of chapter 5. Aaron's service fell into a routine. Every day, offerings were given at dawn and dusk. The burnt offering remained on the altar hearth throughout the night until morning. Aaron wore his fine linen clothes when he was performing sacrifices, but changed into others when carrying the ashes of the offering outside the camp. The Lord had said the fire must never go out, and Aaron saw to it that it did not. Still, he'd worried about it. He dreamed about fire and blood. Even when he was clean, Aaron could smell smoke and blood. He dreamed of people screaming like animals because he had failed to perform his duties properly and appease the Lord's wrath. Even more disturbing, he knew people went on sinning. Hundreds waited in line to take grievances to the elders, and Moses was always busy with one case or another. The people couldn't seem to live at peace with one another. It was in their nature to argue, contend, and fight anything that curtailed them in any way. They did not dare question God, but they questioned his representatives without end. They were no different from Adam and Eve, wanting what was denied them, no matter what harm would come from in the having. Aaron tried to encourage his sons. We must be living examples of righteousness before the people. No one is more righteous than you are, Father. Aaron fought the pleasure of Nadab's flattery, knowing how quickly pride destroyed men. Hadn't it destroyed Pharaoh in Egypt with him? Moses is more righteous, and no one is more humble. Abihu bristled. Moses is always in the tent of meeting, and where are you? Out there serving the people. It seems to me we have the heavier workload. Nadab leaned back on a cushion. When was the last time you saw one of our cousins lift a finger to help? Eleazar looked up from the scroll. Eleazar and Gershom are tending their mother. Eleazar and Gershom are tending their mother. He spoke quietly, frowning. Nadab sneered, pouring himself more wine. Women's work. Miriam stood over them. Don't you think you've had enough to drink? Nadab glanced at her before holding out his goblet. Abihu refilled it before hanging the wineskin on its hook. Aaron did not like the tension in their tent. We are each called to be where we are called to be. Moses is the one who hears the voice of the Lord and brings us God's instruction. We carry them out. We have been given a great honor by the Lord to serve. Yes, yes, Nadab nodded. We know all that, Father, but it is boring to do the same thing day in and day out, knowing we will be doing it for the rest of our lives. Aaron felt a wave of heat coming up inside of him and then sink into a cold lump in his stomach. Remember whom you serve. He looked from Nadab to Abihu and then to his two younger sons, who sat silent, heads down. Did they feel as their brothers did? Aaron felt an urgency to warn them. You will do exactly as the Lord commands. Do you understand? Nadab's eyes changed. We understand you, Father. His fingers tightened on the wine goblet. We will honor the Lord in everything we do, just as you always have. He finished his wine and rose. Abihu followed his brother from the tent. You shouldn't let him talk to you that way, Aaron. Irritated, he glared at Miriam. What do you suggest? Take them by the ear. Give them a whipping. Do something. They both think they're more righteous than you. He could think of a dozen men who were more righteous than he was, starting with his brother and his assistant Joshua. They will come to their senses when they think about it. And if they don't, let it be, woman. I have enough on my mind without your constant nagging. Nagging? As if I haven't always had your best interest in mind. Miriam yanked at the curtain aside to the women's chamber. She pulled the curtain down behind her. The silence was anything but peaceful. Aaron rose. We have work to do. He was thankful it was time to return to the tabernacle. He had no peace in his own tent. Eleazar sat up. We'll be along shortly, Father. He reached out a hand to help Ithamar. Aaron let Eleazar and Ithamar precede him. See that you are, he snapped as the tent flapped down behind him. Eleazar walked beside Aaron. You're going to have to do something about them, Father. Is it your place to speak against your brothers? It is for their sake I speak. As Aaron performed his duties, Eleazar and Ithamar worked with him. Disturbed, Aaron thought about what Eleazar had said. Where were Nadab and Abihu? Aaron could not understand his elder sons. There was nowhere Aaron wanted to be so much as in the courtyard of the Lord. To stand in God's presence was Moses' calling, but to be this close to the Lord filled Aaron with joy. Why could his elder sons not feel the same way? Laughter startled Aaron. Who dared laugh inside the courtyard of God? Turning, he saw Nadab and Abihu at the entrance. Dressed in their priestly garments, they held censers in their hands. What did they think they were doing? Aaron started toward them, ready to take them to task, when Nadab took a small bag from his sash. He sprinkled dust over the burning coals. Yellow, blue, and red smoke rose, the same kind that Egyptian priests had used in their pagan temples. No, Aaron cried. Relax, father, we're only paying homage to God. Abihu held his censer out, and Nadab sprinkled particles into the coals. Would you desecrate God's holy? Desecrate? Nadab stood defiant. Are we not priests? We can show honor to God as we want. He and Abihu stepped forward. Stop! A stream of fire shot past Aaron and struck his two elder sons in the chest. The force knocked Aaron and his two younger sons off their feet. Aaron heard Nadab and Abihu screaming and clambered to his feet. The shrieks of their unbearable agony lasted only seconds before they were consumed by the flames. They had fallen where they stood in defiance, burned beyond recognition. With a cry, Aaron's hand went to his robe. A heavy hand grabbed his shoulder and jerked him back. No, Moses said heavily, do not mourn by letting your hair hang loose or by tearing your clothes. If you do, you will die, and the Lord will be angry with the whole community of Israel. Lungs aching, Aaron swayed. Moses gripped his arm, steadying him. Aaron, listen to me. The rest of the Israelites, your relatives, may mourn for Nadab and Abihu, whom the Lord has destroyed by fire, but you are not to leave the entrance of the tabernacle under penalty of death, for the anointing oil of the Lord is upon you. Aaron remembered the law. No priest was to touch a dead body. This is what the Lord meant when he said, I will show myself holy among those who are near me. I will be glorified before all the people. Aaron fought back tears, fought down the anguish cry that threatened to choke him. The Lord is holy. The Lord is holy. He fixed his mind on the Lord's holiness, bending to it. Eleazar and Ishmael lay prostrate before the temple, faces in the dust, worshiping the Lord. Moses summoned Aaron's cousins, Mishael and Elzaphan. Come and carry the bodies of your relatives away from the sanctuary to a place outside the camp. Aaron watched them lift the charred bodies of his two elder sons and carried them away from in front of the tabernacle. He faced the tabernacle and didn't look back. His chest ached, his throat burned. Would Nadab and Abihu be cast into the refuse for their sins? The voice spoke, still quiet. You and your descendants must never drink wine or any other alcoholic drink before going into the tabernacle. Aaron, Moses was speaking to him, and Aaron tried to absorb his instructions. Aaron and his younger sons were to remain where they were and complete their duties. They were to eat the leftovers from the offering of grain and the goat of the sin offering. Aaron did all Moses instructed, but neither he nor his two sons could eat. The smell of burning meat made Aaron's gorge rise, and he had to clench his teeth to keep from vomiting. Moses' face was red with anger. Why didn't you eat the sin offering in the sanctuary area? He demanded. It's a holy offering that was given to you for the removing of guilt of the community and for making atonement for the people before the Lord. Since the animal's blood was not taken into the holy place, you should have eaten the meat in the sanctuary area as I ordered you. Aaron groaned. Today my sons presented both their sin offering and burnt offering to the Lord. He swallowed convulsively. This kind of thing has also happened to me. He fought his rising emotions, trembling under the strain. Would the Lord have approved if I'd have eaten the sin offering today, when sin lurked so close at hand, waiting to prey on his shattered family and sink its teeth into his weakened heart? My sons, he wanted to cry out. My sons, have you forgotten? My sons died today. He would have choked on the meat of the sin offering and defiled the sanctuary. Nadab's words had come back over and over to haunt him all day. We will honor the Lord in our own way, Father, just as you have, with a golden calf and a feast day of pagan celebration. Even after the atoning sacrifices, Aaron still felt his sins heavy upon him. If only the Lord would erase them forever, if only. Moses looked on Aaron with compassion and said no more. Aaron was with Moses when Moses invited Hobab, Jethro's son, to go with them to the promised land. Stay with us, Hobab. Make your life with God's chosen people, Israel. When Hobab left the camp, Aaron had a sick feeling in his stomach that they would meet Hobab again under less friendly circumstances. All the while, the Midianite remained camped close by. Aaron had wondered if Hobab was merely watching for their weaknesses to see how to make use of them. I hope we don't see him again. Moses looked at him, and Aaron said no more. His brother had spent many years with the Midianites and had deep affection and respect for his father-in-law. Aaron could only hope Moses knew these people as well as he thought he did, and no threat would come from them. For what would Moses do if he ever found himself torn between the Israelites and his wife's family? For 40 years, the Midianites had treated Moses with love and respect, even making him a member of their family. The Israelites had given Moses grief, rebellion, constant complaints, and work, then made him a slave to them. Worry seemed a constant companion these days. Aaron worried about Moses' health, his stamina, his family. Zipporah was near death. The only good that had come of her illness was the softening in Miriam, who often tended to her now. Aaron also worried about getting things right. So far, he'd made one mistake after another. He studied the laws Moses wrote down, knowing they were straight from God, but sometimes when he was tired, he would think of his dead sons, and tears would come up quick and hot. He had loved them, even knowing their sins, and he could not help feeling that he had failed them more than they had failed him. The people were complaining again. They couldn't seem to remember from one day to the next what the Lord had already done for them. They were like children whining with every discomfort. It was the Egyptian rabble who traveled with them that caused the most trouble now. We're sick of nothing to eat but this manna. Oh, for some meat. We remember the fish we used to eat for free in Egypt, and we had all the cucumbers and melons we wanted. They were so good. And the leeks and onions and garlic. But now our appetites are gone, and day after day we have nothing to eat but this manna. Aaron said nothing as he gathered his portion of manna for the day. He squatted and picked up the flakes, putting them into his container. Eleazar was scowling. Ishmael moved a little further off. Miriam was red-faced. Maybe you should have stayed in Egypt. A woman glared. Maybe we should have. Fish and cucumbers, Miriam muttered under her breath. We were lucky to have enough to eat at all, just enough to keep us working. I'm sick of eating the same thing every day. Miriam straightened. You should be thankful. You don't have to work for your food. You don't call this work? We're down on our knees every morning, grubbing around for flakes of this stuff. If only we had meat to eat, an Israelite joined in the complaining. Oh, Mama, do we have to eat manna again? Yes, poor baby, you do. The child began to whine and cry. Surely we were better off in Egypt, the man spoke in a loud voice, knowing Aaron would hear. Miriam glowered. Aren't you going to say something, Aaron? What are you going to do with these people? What did she want him to do? Call down fire from the mountain? He thought of his sons again, and his throat closed hot and dry. He knew Moses heard the people complaining. He saw what it was doing to his brother. Don't make more trouble than we already have, Miriam. He was weary of all of them. I make trouble? If you'd listened to me he rose, staring at her. Did she realize how cruel and thoughtless she could be at times? The fire went out of her eyes. I'm sorry. She lowered her head. He loved his sister, but sometimes he could not abide her. He took his container and walked away. Moses went outside the tabernacle. Aaron went to him. You look tired. I am tired. Moses shook his head. So tired of trouble. I asked the Lord to kill me and have done with it. Do not speak so. Did Moses think Aaron would do any better? For God forbid Moses should die. Aaron never wanted to be in charge again. You need not worry, my brother. God said no. The Lord has given instructions that 70 men be chosen, men known to us as leaders and officials among the people. They are to come here before the tabernacle, and the Spirit of the Lord will fall on them, and then they will help lead God's people. We need help. He smiled. You're older than I, my brother, and showing every day of your 84 years. Aaron laughed bleakly and savored the relief. 2 men could not bear the burden of 600,000 men on foot, not counting their wives and sons and daughters. And the Lord will send meat. Meat? How? From where? Meat for a whole month until we gag and are sick because of it, because the people have rejected the Lord. 68 men came to the tabernacle. As Moses laid hands on each man, the Spirit of the Lord came on each new leader, and he spoke the word of the Lord as Moses did. Joshua came running. Eldad and Medad were prophesying in the camp. Moses, my master, make them stop. Are you jealous for my sake? I wish that all the Lord's people were prophets, and that the Lord would put his Spirit upon all of them. Aaron heard the sound of wind coming from the cloud over the tabernacle. He felt the warmth of it lift his beard and press against his priestly robes close to his body. And then it moved above and away. Aaron returned to his duties in the tabernacle, but kept an apprehensive watch on the sky. Quail flew in from the sea, thousands of them. The wind drove in with a flurry of feathers straight down into the camp until they were piled up 3 feet deep on the ground. You know how big that is? That's like almost to grandma's waist. Not quite, but almost. Be hard to walk through that, wouldn't it? All that day and night, the people gathered birds, wringing their necks and stripping them of feathers in their haste for meat. Some didn't even wait to roast the quail before sinking their teeth into the flesh they craved. Aaron heard the groans and feared he knew what was coming. Groans turned into wails as men and women sickened before the meat was even consumed. They fell to their knees, bent over, vomiting. Some died quickly. Others, as they suffered, cursed God for giving them what the very thing they had demanded. Thousands repented, crying out to the Lord to forgive them. But the quail kept coming as the Lord had promised, day after day, until the people were silent and filled with dread for the Lord. After a month, the cloud lifted from the tabernacle. Aaron entered the most holy place and covered the packed the lampstand, the table of the bread and of presence, and the incense altar. The tent of meeting and the tabernacle were dismantled, packed, and the clan of Levites carried what the Lord had assigned to them. At Moses' signal, 2 men blew trumpets. The people gathered. Rise up, O Lord, Moses' voice boomed. May your enemies be scattered. May your foes flee before you. The Ark of the Covenant was lifted by 4 men. Moses walked ahead, his eyes on the angel of the Lord who led them. The people left the place that had come to be called Graves of Craving. They traveled day and night until the cloud stopped at Hazeroth. Moses held up his arms and praised, Return, O Lord, to the countless thousands of Israel. The Ark of the Covenant was set down. The tabernacle was set up around it. Aaron placed the holy items in their proper places as his sons and the heads of the Gershon, Kohath, and Merari clans of Levites finished putting up the poles and curtains, the altars for the burnt offerings, and the bronze basin. And the people rested. And that's the end of part 2 of chapter 5.